and the recording has now just begun. Hello, my name is Will Hull, and this will be Unit 2 for Illinois for Division C for the hearing for the We the People National Finals. In a moment, I'll have the judges introduce themselves, followed by the students, and then we'll begin our hearing. Students will deliver a 4-minute prepared statement, followed by 8 minutes of judges' questions. My microphone will be muted during the hearing, but I will be holding up the 1 minute as well as the time signs to indicate those periods during our hearing. I suggest that you use the gallery view for those of you who are perhaps watching. And afterwards, at this point, I'll go ahead and, or excuse me, at the conclusion of the hearing, judges will provide brief feedback as well, and then we'll conclude the hearing. At this point, I'll go ahead and pass the microphone to the judges and they will introduce themselves.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Julie Silverbrook. I am the Senior Director of Partnerships and Constitutional Scholar in Residence at iCivics, and I am thrilled to be here with all of you today. I'll let my other judges go ahead and introduce themselves as well.
Good afternoon. My name is Tim Igo. I am a lawyer, writer, and magazine editor, and I work at the State Bar of Arizona in Phoenix.
Good afternoon. Nick Drummond. I'm an assistant professor of political science at Black Hills State University in South Dakota.
Good afternoon. We are Unit 2 for Maine South High School. Our esteemed coaches are Andrew Trankel and Kevin C. Hansen. My name is Cooper Katowski.
And I'm Susie Curry.
I'm Molly Russell.
I'm Brecken Enright.
And I'm Justin Kim. Thank you so much for having us today.
Terrific. I'm going to let you know which question you'll be answering today. You'll be answering question 1, which I will now read to you in full. What were the major disagreements among the 55 delegates during the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, and how were they resolved? What issues, if any, were not resolved, and what were the consequences? What changes, if any, should be made to the Constitution? You may begin whenever you're ready.
There never was an assembly of men charged with a great and arduous trust who were more pure in their motives or more exclusively or anxiously devoted to the object committed to them, is how James Madison described the delegates at the convention. However, the 55 men who assembled in Philadelphia all held different ideas about how much power the federal government should hold.
Including the federalism debate, representation and construction of the legislature, and the creation of the executive branch were the most debated topics. Although the founders compromised on some issues at the convention, slavery, women's and minority rights, and representation remain heavily debated topics from the 18th century to today.
A major debate at the convention centered around the construction of the legislative branch. Federalists argued for equal voting power and that each representative should serve a district connecting them to the national government. However, some delegates believed power should be derived from the states, not from the people.
The Virginia plan proposed a bicameral legislature with proportional representation for every state, and the New Jersey delegation proposed a plan consisting of a single chamber legislature in which each state would have 1 vote.
A compromise was then proposed and provided a dual system of representation that blended the plans. In the House of Representatives, each state's number of seats would be in proportion to the population, and in the Senate, all states would have the same number of seats.
Unlike the debate over the legislative branch, executive power was agreed upon at the convention. Roger Sherman summarized that he, quote, considered the executive magistrate as nothing more than an institution for carrying out the will of the legislator, end quote.
James Wilson, the architect of the presidency, agreed, but Charles Pinckney challenged Wilson's plan for a single magistrate when he proposed a council modeled after the British cabinet. This was ultimately rejected, and the other delegates agreed with Wilson's assertion that a council, quote, often serves to cover than prevent malpractices.
Delegates from northern states called for direct election of the president, while southern delegates favored an election outlined in Madison's Virginia plan. A committee was formed to draft a solution to this issue, and eventually the Electoral College was proposed.
Debates left unresolved by the founders included slavery, racial discrimination, and women's rights. The founders' silence on these topics, specifically slavery, were not accidental.
The goal of the convention was for the delegates to persuade one another, and forthright discussion on said topics would have made compromise more difficult. Slavery entered the Constitution by way of the 3/5 clause in a discussion about the appointment of representatives. Historian Elizabeth Vernon agrees that, quote, slavery, more than any other issue, divided the North and South.
Anti-slavery Northerners worried about overrepresentation of the slave South, while Southerners wanted representation apportioned by population. These disagreements were a catalyst for the Civil War and consequently led to the ratification of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. Even today, groups like Black Lives Matter fight to eradicate racial inequality in America.
Along with racial equality, women today continue to advocate for their own equality. And as Woodrow Wilson once said, when men and women are equally admitted to those rights, we have the best safeguard of justice and of peace that the world affords, end quote, which is why so many women continue to advocate for change through avenues like the Equal Rights Amendment.
The Electoral College is an aspect of the Constitution that needs to be abolished or amended. The Electoral College shrinks the map of the US down to only 13 states that are considered swing states during election cycles.
Abolishing the Electoral College would eliminate the idea that historically Democratic or Republican states don't matter to campaigns and would force candidates to appeal to all voters, not just the ones in swing states.
Disagreements between the delegates at the convention have led to centuries-long debates over different issues regarding slavery and now racial equality, along with women's rights in America. Social issues continue to be debated today, and current political partisanship has shed light on institutional changes that need to be made to ensure that all voices are heard.
Thank you. We are now open for questions.
Terrific. Thank you so much. So I want to follow up on your proposed change to abolish the Electoral College and ask if you abolish the Electoral College, what is your proposed alternative for electing president?
I would argue that obviously we know that abolishing the Electoral College is a meticulous task. 800 attempts have been made to abolish or amend it, and none have passed. So I think as an alternative to abolish it, noting that it is so difficult, is establishing the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, which would allocate the votes for whoever wins the popular vote, which 65% of Americans, according to Pew Research, agree that whoever wins the popular vote should win the election. And judging by the fact that 5 presidents have lost the popular vote but still have won the election, we want to see that change implemented throughout today.
And regarding our argument about why we shouldn't abolish the Electoral College, the Electoral College, looking in the lens of the framers, we are a democratic republic. They established a republic, especially in Federalist number 10, where Madison basically defends why we cannot have a direct democracy. We cannot be too democratic because it is the nature of man. And that is why just one argument as to why we believe the Electoral College has to be amended rather than abolished is because then we're going to become too democratic of a system, which the framers would definitely not like.
Another proposed change to the Electoral College would be that we would abolish it and replace it with the national popular vote. This kind of moves more towards the democracy that is a true democracy. As we saw with the change of how we elected senators, we kind of believe that it's just sort of a natural progression for us to move to become a more democratic country. And a way to do that would to be having everybody's vote count the same and know that your vote is going to matter no matter what. If you live in a blue state or a red state, your voice is still going to be heard.
Thank you so much. I would like to invite the other judges to pose the questions that they have as well.
Sure, let me start. I'm curious about your views of term limits for members of Congress, and looking both at the challenges that the founders faced and their conclusions they came to, and the challenges we face today. Does the situation we have continue to work?
I think that looking at this from the founders' perspective, at the time of the Constitutional Convention, we saw the proposal of the Virginia and the New Jersey plan. The Virginia proposed the executive to have a term limit of 7 years, while the New Jersey plan proposed to have an executive that consisted of about 6 or 7 individuals. And I think that with the 22nd Amendment being ratified that set the term limit of 4 years, I do believe that that was the correct compromise between the two, as it wouldn't allow for an executive to hold too much power and potentially lead to a tyrannical government that had too much power over the people in the states. And I don't think that the New Jersey plan would have worked, as that's kind of what the Electoral College serves as with the group of people represented.
And let me ask you to talk about the legislators as well.
Yeah, I would agree that term limits do need to be instituted for the legislative branch. In our district, Jan Schakowsky has been representing us since before all of us were born. So I think that creating a system with, for example, maybe 2 term limits for every senator, or maybe 4 for every representative, would allow for people to be involved in government, not as just their career, but have a purpose for being there and see the changes they want to have be made, and then sort of let new voices be heard in the government, and not just have the same person be representing a single district for 20+ years.
And in addition to what my colleague said about term limits, and specifically answering your question about does our system still work, I think obviously we've seen lots and lots of issues within our legislative branch, but I would like to point out that recently we were able to pass the CARES Act for coronavirus relief and offering small businesses loans and stimulus checks for our citizens. So while we are having lots of difficulties in our legislative branch, I think term limits would be something that could work to solve that. There is no hope for our legislative branch at the current moment.
I agree with my colleague, and I think we see some continuity between that and of the 27th Amendment, which disallows congressmen from adding to their salary midterm. And I think based on the statistic that 5% of the US is millionaires and 50% of congressmen are millionaires. And I think this disconnect between representation of the people and of the Congress has strayed. And I think continuing the progress of the 27th Amendment, as well as adding term limits, would do better in serving us.
Thank you.
Justin, you mentioned Federalist 10. I was wondering if you or anyone on your panel might then respond to this question. One of the major points of contention at the convention, and certainly thereafter in the newspapers, was the question of the size of the republic. What was its size? Can you say something about this debate? What were the disagreements, and where do you fall in that debate?
So in Federalist 10, Madison points out that it is in line with Montesquieu in the spirit of the laws. He says that a democracy is only possible when it covers a small area. In that sense, the United States spans such a large region, we'd become a republic. So I think that was one of the kind of that started the debate over representation, that a lot of the founding fathers agreed that it might be difficult to have a popular vote. Like Madison said, instability, injustice, and confusion introduced into public councils in truth is the mortal disease that perishes popular governments everywhere. In Federalist 10,
continuing off of what Brecken said, Madison claimed in Federalist 10 that the larger union would be a safeguard against factions. And I think that we would agree that the larger the union got, it was a safeguard against factions. And I think this can also be seen through the more states that were added to the union, the less amount of amendments have been able to be passed. And I think that 75% threshold, like, every state is sort of its own little faction, and with every state being able to protect themselves against the other states in the union, I think we were able to both safeguard against factions and still facilitate change in ways that really matter, because we have seen that the amendment process has still been able to be continued to go through modern day. So although there are factions, there are still ways to get things passed. And I think that the will of the people is always expressed, as Madison thought it would.
I want to ask a follow-up question. One of the reform areas that you identified was on women's rights, and what proposals you have for the expansion and protection of the rights of women.
I do believe that
Never mind. We're out of time. Sorry, guys. I missed the 1 minute warning. I am interested in your answer, though. Thanks so much. Congratulations on a job well done. And I made the mistake of going to speaker view because you guys are all in one room, and missed our facilitator holding up the 1 minute sign. So sorry about that. I thought you guys did a good job of taking us through, a number of the major issues in the convention. I would have liked to see some discussion on the Supreme Court that didn't make it into your primary testimony, and a little bit more on federalism. I appreciated the amount of time you spent on the presidency and the Electoral College. I thought you did a great job in answering our questions. I think you actually really shined in the Q&A section of the hearing. Overall, I think you did a great job, and I would have loved to hear your answer on women's rights had time permitted.
Thank you.
So I would agree. Sorry about that. I enjoyed the conversation very much. I thought things did come alive quite a bit in the Q&A, and it was a great conversation. I believe you might be the first group today to mention Black Lives Matter, so that was timely. I think a deeper dive, considering the issues, would even be warranted more. Strong position on the Electoral College. I think the first to mention the ERA. As Julie said, so kudos for that. And then I think you were able to get into some of the issues, but not as deeply. If we had 10 more minutes, you can get in more deeply on the question of factionalism and whether the ideal, going off next question, whether the ideal of civic virtue is still even a possibility with the massive republic we have right now. Is that still a motivating factor for people? I'm hoping it is. I'd love to hear your views, but that'll have to be another time. Thank you.
So I echo many of the things said by my colleagues. I thought you were very versatile in terms of the evidence you were giving us, pointing at different things, quoting stats, the part about the Millionaires Club being in Congress. I sat up a little bit taller in my chair when I heard that. That's certainly an issue that matters to me. I thought you did well with the Madison question. I would also have liked to hear more about civic virtue, but I thought you had some interesting applications of it. The argument about each state being its own faction, I thought that was well put. But overall, very nice job.